Hello and welcome back to Mountain Home Stories. I'm thrilled to continue our journey through the enchanting pages of Tales of the Sun, Folklore of Southern India, collected by the wonderful Mrs. Howard Kingscote and Pandit Natesa Sastri. Today is episode 3 and I have a packed session featuring some truly memorable characters. We are going to explore 4 fascinating fables. These stories are filled with humor, moral lessons, and the rich cultural heritage of South India. If you are enjoying these tales of old, please like this video, share it with a fellow folklore lover, and subscribe to Mountain Home Stories for more storytelling sessions. Let's begin. Story 5. Charity Alone Conquers. Dharma Mein Jayam. In the town of Tevai, there lived a king called Suguna. He had an excellent minister named Dharmashila. They ruled for a long time in prosperity over the kingdom. Both of them had sons. The prince's name was Subuddhi. He was a noble prince and, quite in keeping with his name, was always bent upon doing good to the world. The minister's son was called Durbuddhi, a most wicked boy whose only delight was teasing beasts and birds from his infancy, and which ripened into all sorts of wickedness as he grew to boyhood. Notwithstanding the difference between their temperaments, the prince and the minister's son were the best of friends. The motto of the prince was Dharma Mein Jayam, charity alone conquers. That of the minister's son was Adharma Mein Jayam, absence of charity alone conquers. When rising from their beds, when beginning their prayers, when sitting down for meals or study, and, in fact, before beginning to do anything, each repeated his motto. The people had great hopes in Subuddhi, whom they fully expected to see a good and benevolent king. But the minister's son all thoroughly hated. Even the minister himself, his father, hated his son for his vile turn of mind, which he found impossible to change. His only friend, as we have already said, was the prince, who, notwithstanding all his faults, loved him sincerely. Both of them had grown up together from their very cradle, had played in the same dust, had read their lessons side by side in the same school under the same teachers. Fortune so ordained that the prince's mind should take such a bend, while the mind of the minister's son turned in a crooked way. Nor was Durbuddhi insensible to the disgust and dislike which everyone manifested towards him. He was well aware of all that was going on around. Still, he would not change. "I have no friend in this world excepting yourself, my dear Subuddhi," exclaimed Durbuddhi one day to his royal friend while they were riding together. "Fear nothing. I shall ever stand by you as your true friend," replied Subuddhi. "My very father hates me. Who else would like me then? On the other hand, everyone likes you. You may soon get yourself married to some beautiful lady, while I must remain a bachelor, for no girl would marry me. You may soon rise to the place of a king, but I cannot become your minister, as the people do not like me. What can I do?" So said the minister's son, and hung down his head, as if conscious for a time of the utter hatred with which the people regarded him. Subuddhi replied, "He did not. I will make you my minister, give you everything you want, and see you well provided for. If so, will you give me a wife one day at least, if you happen to get married before me, and if I remain a bachelor after you?" were the words which the wretched Durbuddhi shamelessly uttered to the face of his only friend. These words were enough in themselves to enrage the prince's mind, but he was of so good a nature that instead of becoming angry, he smiled at the stupidity of his companion and agreed that he would thus give him his wife one day in case he got married first. Thus took place an agreement between Subuddhi and Durbuddhi while they were still quite young. Several years passed after this agreement, when one day the prince went to hunt in a neighboring forest. His inseparable companion, the minister's son, and several hunters followed him to the wood. The prince and the minister's son both gave chase to a deer. They rode so much in advance of the hunters that they lost themselves in a thick jungle where the latter could neither see nor follow them. The hunters returned after dark and informed the king and the minister about the disappearance of their sons. They thought that as their sons were grown-up men, they need not fear for their safety. The two friends chased the deer and found themselves in the midst of a thick forest in the evening. Except a slight breakfast in the early morning, they had tasted no other food. Hunger was pinching them severely. The hot chase had awakened a severe thirst, to quench which they were not able to find a drop of water. In utter hopelessness of life, they resigned themselves to the course of their steeds. The beasts seemed very well to understand the wants of their royal riders. They went on trotting and at last, about midnight, stopped on the banks of a large tank. The riders, who were almost dead with thirst, opened their closed eyes when the horses stopped. All of a sudden, and to their great joy, they found themselves on the banks of a large tank. Their joy knew no bounds. Surely, God takes care of His children. Had it not been for His kind care, how could we have come to this tank when we had given ourselves up to the guidance of our horses? Thought Subuddhi to himself, and got down from his horse. The minister's son, who had become more exhausted by that time than his companion, also alighted. Subuddhi, true to the nobility of his mind, took both the steeds first to water, and after satisfying their thirst and loosening them to graze by the side of a grassy meadow, he went into the water to quench his thirst. The minister's son also followed. After a short prayer, Subuddhi took some handfuls of water and returned to the bank. Durbuddhi also returned. They chose a clean spot and sat down to rest during the remaining part of the night. The prince, when taking his seat, pronounced his usual motto, "Charity alone conquers." And the minister's son also repeated his, "Absence of charity alone conquers." These words fell like venom into the ears of the prince at that time. He could not control his anger then, notwithstanding his mild disposition. The hardships of the day, their fortunate arrival on a tank in the dead of night to have their thirst quenched, were fresh in Subuddhi's mind, and the prayers that he was offering to God were not yet over. That the minister's son should never think of all this and go on with his own stupid motto, even at that time, was intolerable to Subuddhi. "Vile wretch! Detested atheist! Have you no shame to utter your wicked motto even after such calamities? It is not too late even now. Mend your character. Think of the God that saved you just now. Believe in Him. Change your motto from this day." Thus spoke the angry prince to the minister's son. Durbuddhi, who was naturally of a wicked and quarrelsome temperament, flew into a rage at once at the excellent advice of the prince. "Stop your mouth. I know as well as you do, you cannot wag your tail here. I can oppose you single-handed in this forest." Thus saying, the minister's son sprang like an enraged lion at Subuddhi, who, as he never dreamt of any such thing, was completely overpowered by the wicked Durbuddhi. The prince was thrown down in the twinkling of an eye, and the minister's son was upon him. He severely thrashed his royal master, and, taking hold of a twig that was lying close by, tore out the prince's 2 eyes, filled up the sockets with sand, and ran away with his horse, thinking that he had completely killed him. Subuddhi was almost dead. His body was bruised all over. His eyes were no more. His physical pain was unbearable. "Is there a God over us all?" thought Subuddhi. The night was almost over. The cool and sweet breeze of the morning gave him some strength. He rose up and, crawling on the ground, felt his way to the entrance of a temple. He crept in, shut the gates, and fastened the bolt. It happened to be a temple of the fierce Kali. She used to go out every morning to gather roots and fruits and to return at evening. That day, when she returned, she found her gates shut against her. She threatened with destruction the usurper of her temple. A voice, as we know that it was Subuddhi's, replied from within, "I'm already dying of the loss of my eyes, so if in anger you kill me, it is so much the better. For what use is there in my living blind? If, on the contrary, you pity me, and by your divine power give me my eyes, I shall open the gates." Kali was in a very difficult position. She was very hungry and saw no other way of going inside than by giving Subuddhi his eyes. "Open the gates, your request is granted," said Kali. No sooner were these words uttered than the prince recovered his eyes. His delight may be better imagined than described. He opened the gates and vowed before Kali that he would from that day continue in that temple as her servant and worshipper. The wretched Durbuddhi, after his horrible act, rode on composedly, following the footsteps of his horse, and reached the forest where he had been hunting the day before in company with the prince. He thence returned home all alone. When his father saw him coming back, he suspected something wrong to the prince and asked his son what had become of him. "We chased a deer, and he rode so much in advance of me that he was out of sight, and finding all search vain, I returned alone," was Durbuddhi's reply. "This I would have believed from anyone but yourself. Never plant your feet in these dominions till you bring back the prince again. Run for your life," was the order of the minister. And Durbuddhi accordingly ran off, fearing the anger of his father. Thus the prince Subuddhi served in the Kali temple, and Durbuddhi, fully confident that he had killed his friend, roamed about from place to place, as he saw no possibility of returning to his own country without the prince. Thus passed several months. The goddess Kali was extremely delighted at the sincere devotion of Subuddhi, and, calling him one day to her side, said, "My son, I am delighted with your great devotion to me. Enough of your menial services here. Better return now to your kingdom. Your parents are likely to be much vexed at your loss. Go and console their minds." Thus ended Kali, and Subuddhi replied, "Excuse me, my goddess, my mother. I no more regard them as my parents. This wood is not a large place if they wish to search for me. As they were so careless about me, I shall also from this day disregard them. You are my father and mother. Therefore, permit me to end my days here in your service." So saying, Subuddhi begged Kali to allow him to stay, and the goddess agreed accordingly, for some time at least. After a few more months, Kali called the prince again to her and addressed him thus: "My boy, I have devised another plan. Better not, then, go to your parents, as you do not wish to go now. At a short distance from this place in the Kaveri country reigns a staunch devotee of mine. His daughter had smallpox, and as he forgot to do proper respect to me, I have blinded both her eyes. The king has issued a proclamation that he will give the whole kingdom and his daughter in marriage to him who would cure her of her defect. He has hung up a bell, ghanta, at which every physician who wishes to try the case strikes. The king comes running as soon as he hears the sound, takes home the doctor and shows him the case. Several persons have tried in vain, for who could repair a defect inflicted by the displeasure of the gods? Now I mean to send you there. That king is a staunch worshipper of my feet. Though I have punished him, still I pity the sad calamity that has come upon his daughter. You had better go there and strike the bell. He will take you and show you the case. For 3 consecutive days apply my holy ashes to her eyes. Though fools may deride these ashes, Still, by them a true devotee can work wonders. On the fourth day, her eyes will be perfectly restored. Then you will secure her hand and, what is more, the country of Kaveri. Reign there, for you are born to reign, being a prince, and not to spend your time here in this wood. If you do not do so, you will commit a sin, and, what is more, incur my displeasure. Thus ended Kali, and the prince could not refuse, for he feared the anger of the goddess. Agreeing to her words and her manifold blessings, he started and reached the kingdom of Kaveri. He struck the bell. The king came running to welcome the new doctor. All the previous physicians had tried by medicines, external and internal. The new doctor, Prince Subuddhi, proposed to treat the case by mantras, incantations. The old king, who was very religious, fully believed that the new doctor might effect the cure, and just as he expected, on the fourth day, his daughter's sight was completely restored. The king's joy knew no bounds. He inquired into the parentage of the doctor, and when he came to know that he had princely blood in his veins, that he was as honorably descended as himself, his joy was greatly increased. He sent up 1,000 prayers to the god for giving him a royal son-in-law. As promised in his notice, he would have to give his daughter to anyone, whatever he might be, who effected the cure. The lowest beggar, the lowest caste man, if he had only succeeded in curing her, would have had as much claim to her hand as the prince physician. So when the person that effected the cure proved to be a prince, the king was extremely delighted and at once made all arrangements for the marriage of his daughter and gave her to Subuddhi, and himself being very old, he gave the kingdom also to the prince at the same time. Thus, by the favor of Kali, Subuddhi had a princess for his wife and a kingdom to govern. Subuddhi, as we know, was an excellent man. Though he became a king now, he consulted his father-in-law in all matters and, in fact, acted only as manager for the old man. Every evening he used to consult him for an hour or two before disposing of intricate cases. The duty of signing, too, he reserved for the old man. Thus, even on those days when there were no cases, he used to go to his father-in-law to get papers signed. Thus passed on a couple of years or so. One evening, while sitting in company with his wife in the loftiest room of his palace after the duties of the day, he cast his eyes to the East Main Street and contemplated the bustle of that part of the town. Carts creaking under the load of merchandise, the flourish with which the goods and wares were exposed for sale, fashionable gentlemen in their fanciful evening costumes walking to and fro, the troublesome hawkers that stand by the roadside questioning everyone as to what they would buy, and several other things interested him, and for a time made him somewhat proud even that he ruled over such a rich country. But sweetness is not always accompanied with bitterness. He saw in that same street a man whose face was very similar to him, but whom he could not at once make out. A black man was sitting on a projecting pile of a corner of a shop and was mending some torn gunny bags. Subuddhi looked at him carefully. "Is it the minister's son, Durbuddhi? No, he is not so black. Rather was not when I saw him last," thought Subuddhi with himself. And examining his face, he at last exclaimed, "It is he! It is he! It is my friend and companion!" "Who is it?" exclaimed the princess, and rushed at once to his side. She had most carefully watched her husband's face for the past few minutes while he was in deep contemplation. "It is my friend, the minister's son, by name Durbuddhi. We were companions from our birth. We played in the same dust, read in the same school, and were even inseparable companions. "I do not know what has brought him to the condition in which I see him now," said Subuddhi, and sent someone to fetch him. Of the wicked and base act of the vile Durbuddhi, he did not care to inform his gentle wife, who now retired to her inner apartments, as decorum did not allow her to be in company with her husband when he was receiving others. The persons sent brought in Durbuddhi. Whatever might have been the cruelty that he had received from the hands of the minister's son, the prince began to shed tears when he saw his old companion ushered in, not in that blooming, cheerful red complexion in which he had seen him last, but in a weather-beaten, dark skin and dejected colour of a coolie, in which he saw him a few minutes ago. "I excuse you all your faults, my dear Durbuddhi. Tell me quickly, what has brought you to this wretched plight?" asked Subuddhi, and while asking, he began to cry aloud. The minister's son also shed tears copiously, and tried or pretended to cry, for be it known that he was a perfect scoundrel, born to no good in the world. "My own mischief has brought me to this plight. When I returned to our country after putting out your eyes and thinking that I killed you, my father banished me from our dominions and ordered me never to plant my feet within their limits without bringing you back. As I thought I had put an end to your life, I never came back to that tank in search of you. I engaged myself as a coolie in the streets of this town after trying several other places without success, and I now stand before you." Thus ended Durbuddhi, and the prince quite forgot his cruelty to him. He ordered his servants to get the minister's son bathed and attired in as rich robes as he himself wore. Then he related to him his own story without omitting a single point, and at once made him his minister. The whole story of Durbuddhi, excepting the single point of his having put out his eyes, the prince related to his wife, father, and mother-in-law. Thus was Durbuddhi again restored to his high position through the liberal kindness of Subuddhi. Subuddhi did not stop even at this. He began to send him with papers and other things to the old king for signature. This went on for some months. All the while Durbuddhi was as obedient as might be, and by his vile tricks had completely won over the heart of the old king. One evening, after the signatures were over, Durbuddhi stopped for a while, as if desirous to speak. "What do you want?" said the old king. "Nothing but your favour," was the only reply, after which he retired. Thus he went on for some days and weeks. Every day he stopped for a few minutes after the state business was over, and when the old king asked the reason for it, went on giving evasive answers. At last one evening the old king was extremely provoked. The cunning Durbuddhi had purposely intended this. "What a big fool are you to stop every day, as if wishing to speak and never to utter a word," broke out the old king. "I beg pardon of your honour. I was thinking all the while whether I should let out my secret or not. At last I have come to the conclusion that I will keep it to myself," replied the diabolical Durbuddhi. "No, you shall let it out," roared the old king, whose curiosity was more roused than abated by the words, purposely obscure, of the minister's son. Durbuddhi, after stimulating much reluctance at disclosing the supposed secret, loudly began his harangue. "My lord, ever since I came here, I have been making inquiries about the nobility of your family, about the sacrifices that you and your ancestors have performed, about the purifications that you and your elders have undergone, and about 1,000 other particulars, each of which is enough to secure you and your descendants the place of Achyuta himself. These delighted me for a time. I say for a time, for listen, please, to what follows. When I compared with the pure fame of your famous family, that of your son-in-law, my heart began to pain me. Indeed, the pain which began at that moment has not yet ceased. Know, then, that your son-in-law is not a prince. No doubt he has royal blood in his veins, which makes him look like a king. How can he be so skillful in medicine? Just inquire the cause. To be no more in the dark, the king of my country, over which my father is the minister, set out one day on Sabar. While passing a barber street, he saw a beautiful damsel of that caste. Bewitched by her beauty, the king wanted to include her in his harem, notwithstanding her low position in society. The child of that woman is your son-in-law. He, being the son of a barber mother, acquired thus easily the art of medicine. That a king was his father makes him look like a prince. If he had been of pure birth, why should he leave his kingdom and come here to effect the cure of your daughter? Except this prince, or supposed prince, all those that came here were mere doctors by caste. Thus ended the vile Durbuddhi, and taking in his hand the papers, vanished out of the room quickly, like a serpent that had stung. The sweet words in which the minister's son clothed his arguments, the rising passion at the thought that he had been falsely imposed upon by a barber's son, the shame, or rather supposed shame, that he thought had come over his family, and 1,000 other feelings clouded for a time the clear reason of the old king. He saw no other way of putting an end to the shame than by the murder of his dear daughter and son-in-law first, and of his own self and queen afterwards. At once he sent for the executioner, who came in. He gave him his signet ring and commanded him to break open the bedroom of his son-in-law that midnight and murder him with his wife while asleep. The hukums or orders given with signet rings can never be disobeyed. The executioner humbled himself to the ground as a sign of his accepting the order and retired to sharpen his knife for his terrible duty. Neither Subuddhi nor his affectionate wife had any reason to suspect this terrible mandate. The old queen and the treacherous Durbuddhi had equally no reason to know anything about it. The old man, after issuing the hukum, shut himself up in his closet and began to weep and wail as if he had lost his daughter from that moment. Durbuddhi, after kindling the fire, as says the Tamil proverb, by means of his treachery, came back with the papers to the prince. A thought occurred in his mind that Subuddhi's fate was drawing near. He wanted to carry out the agreement between himself and the prince about the latter's wife. The excellent Subuddhi, who always observed oaths most strictly, was confused for a time. He did not know what to do. To stick to the oath and surrender his wife to another, or to break it and preserve the chastity of his own wife. At last, repeating in his own mind, "Charity alone conquers," and also thinking that heaven would somehow devise to preserve his wife, he went to her, explained to her how the matter stood, and ordered her to go to the minister's son. She hesitatingly consented, for, as a good wife, she could not disobey her husband's commands. Subuddhi then told Durbuddhi that he might have his wife as his own. The princess went to her mother, crying that her husband had turned out mad. Or else, who would promise to give his wife to another? What does he mean by that? My daughter, fear nothing. Perhaps in his boyhood he made this rash promise without thinking. The promise once made now pains him, unable to break it, and leaving it to yourself to preserve your chastity, he has so ordered you. And he would, nay must, excuse you if you by some means or other save yourself and apparently make good your husband's promise also. A thought just comes to me how to do that. There is your foster sister, exactly resembling you, I shall send her in your place." So consoling her daughter, the old queen at once made all the requisite arrangements, and of course Subhuti had no reason then to know anything about them. In the middle of the night his door is forced open, and a ruffian with a drawn sword, blazing like lightning, rushes in and murders the pair. Thus, in that very night in which Durbuddhi had reached the topmost point of his vice, he was cut down by the supreme hand of God. For it is said that when crime increases, God himself cannot tolerate it. The morning dawned. Subhuti rose from his couch, and after his morning prayers was sitting in the council hall. The princess and his mother rose from their beds and were attending to their business. A servant just at that time came running to the old queen and said, "Our king is weeping in his room that his daughter is now no more. I think that there is something wrong with his majesty's brain today. Come and console him." The queen, who knew nothing of what had happened, ran to her husband's room, quite astonished at the change. The husband reported everything to her. The sage-looking minister's son, the barber's son-in-law, and everything, and then concluded that their daughter and son-in-law were no more. "What? Compose yourself. Your son-in-law is sitting in his darbar. Your daughter is just adorning herself in a dressing room. Were you dreaming? Are you in your right senses?" said the queen. The king ordered the executioner to bring the heads, which, on examination, proved to be those of the minister's son and of the foster sister. The queen told everything of the one-day wife-giving engagement and her own arrangements about it. The old king could not understand what all this meant. He drew out his sword and ran to the darbar like a maddened lion and stood armed before his son-in-law. "Relate to me your true origin and everything respecting yourself. Speak the truth. How came you to learn medicine? If you are a prince, why should you leave your own dominions and come down here? What about this wicked agreement of giving your wife to another? Who is this minister's son?" Subhuti, without omitting a single point, related everything that had taken place, even to the putting out of his eyes. The old man threw down his sword, took his son-in-law in his arms almost, for so great was his joy at the excellent way which fate had prepared for his escape, and said, "My son, my life, my eye, true it is, true it is. Dharma alone conquers, and you that hold that motto have conquered everything. The vile wretch whom, notwithstanding the series of rogueries that he practiced upon you, you protected, has at last found out that his adharmam never conquers. But he never found it out. It was his adharmam that cut him off on the very night of his supposed complete conquest by it." Letters were sent at once to Tevai, inviting Suguna and Dharmashila to the happy rejoicings at the prince and princess's delivery, and a remarriage was celebrated with all pomp in honor of their lucky escape. Dharmashila, as he disliked his son, never shed a single tear for his loss. Subhuti lived for a long time, giving much consolation to his own and his wife's parents. Through the blessings of Kali, they had several intelligent sons. Number 1 word, Tevai, is the classical name of the modern town of Ramnad in the district of Madura. Story 6, Vedamandan, Kodamandan. Mr. Won't Give and Mr. Won't Leave. In a certain town, there lived a clever old Brahman named Won't Give. He used to go out daily and to beg in all the houses round, under the pretense that he had to feed several Brahmins in his own house. Good people that believed in his words used to give him much rice and curry stuffs, with which he would come home and explain to his wife how he had deceived such and such a gentleman by the imposition of feeding in charity many persons at home. But if any hungry Brahman, who had heard of his empty boast of feeding Brahmins at home, came to him, he was sent away with some excuse or other. In this way, Mr. Won't Give brought home a basketful of rice and other necessities every day, of which he only used a small portion for himself and his wife, and converted the remainder into money. And thus, by imposition and tricks, he managed to live well for several years. In an adjoining village, there lived another very clever Brahmin named Won't Leave. Whenever he found any man reluctant and unwilling to give him anything that he begged of him, he would persist in bothering him until he had wrung from him a dole. This Mr. Won't Leave, hearing of the charity of Mr. Won't Give and his benevolent feeding of Brahmins, came to see him one day and requested him to give him a meal. Mr. Won't Give told him that for that day 10 Brahmins had already been settled, and that if he came the next day, he would have his meal without fail. Mr. Won't Leave agreed to this, and left him for that day. Mr. Won't Give had, of course, told him the very lie he was accustomed to tell all that occasionally begged meals of him. Now Mr. Won't Leave was not so stupid as to be thus imposed upon. He stood before Mr. Won't Give's door precisely at the appointed Ghatika, hour, the next day, and reminded the master of the house of his promise. Mr. Won't Give had never before been taken at his word, and determined to send away the impertinent guest by some stronger excuse than the first, and so he spoke to him thus: "Sir, I am very sorry to say that my wife fell ill last night of a strong fever, from which she has not yet recovered. Owing to this unforeseen accident, I have had to postpone my charitable feedings, Samaradhana, till her recovery. So, do not trouble me, please, for some days more." Mr. Won't Leave heard these words with an expression of sincere, or rather, seemingly sincere, sorrow in his face, and replied, "Respected sir, I am very sorry for the illness of the mistress of the house, but to give up charitable feeding of Brahmins on that account is a great sin. For the last 10 years, I have been studying the art of cooking and can now cook for even several hundreds of Brahmins. So I can assist you now in preparing the necessaries for the Samaradhana." Mr. Won't Give could not refuse such a request, but he deceitfully determined in his mind to get Mr. Won't Leave to cook for him and then to drive him away without giving him his rice. And so he said, "Yes, that is a very good idea. I am much obliged to you for your kind suggestion. Come in, let us cook together." So saying, the master of the house took Mr. Won't Leave inside, and they both went into the kitchen, while the mistress of the house, at the command of her husband, pretended to be ill. Now, Mr. Won't Give was a good liver and prepared, with the assistance of Mr. Won't Leave, several good dishes. And then the difficulty was to drive the fellow out, for the long-maintained rule of never feeding a single Brahman must not be broken that day. So, when the cooking was all over, the master of the house gave to Mr. Won't Leave a kasu, that is a copper coin, and asked him to bring some leaves from the bazaar for plates, and he accordingly went. Mr. Won't Give, meanwhile, came to his wife and instructed her thus: "My dearest wife, I have spared you the trouble of cooking today. Would that we could get such stupid fools as this every day to cook for us. I have now sent him out to fetch us some leaves, and it won't look well if we shut our doors against him or drive him away. So we must make him go away of his own accord. A thought has just come into my mind as to how we can do it. As soon as he comes, you shall commence to quarrel with me. I shall then come to you and beat you, or rather, the ground near you, with both my hands, and you must continue your abuse and cries. The guest will find this very disgusting and leave us of his own accord." Mr. Won't Give had just finished when he saw Mr. Won't Leave returning with the leaves. The wife, as prearranged, abused her husband right and left for his great imprudence and over liberality in feeding the Brahmins. Said she,
How are we to get on in the world if you thus empty the house of everything we have in feeding big-bellied Brahmins? Must you be so particular as to invite them even when I am sick?" These and 1,000 similar expressions were now launched at the husband's head. He pretended not to hear it for a time, but at last, apparently overcome by anger, he went in and with his hands gave successive blows on the floor. At every blow on the floor, the wife cried out that she was being murdered and that those who had mercy in their hearts should come to her rescue. Mr. Won't-Leave, from the courtyard of the house, listened to what was taking place inside, but not wishing to interfere in a quarrel between husband and wife, left matters to take their own course and got into the loft, where he hid himself, fearing that he would be summoned as a witness to the quarrel. After a time, Mr. Won't-Give came out of the room where he had been beating the floor, and to his joy, he could not find the guest. He cautiously looked round him and saw no signs of Mr. Won't-Leave. Of course, having had no reason to think that his guest would be sitting in the loft, he did not look up there. And even if he had done so, he would not have found him, for he had hidden himself out of sight. Mr. Won't-Give now carefully bolted the door, and his wife came out and changed her dirty cloth for a clean one. Said her husband to her, "At last we have succeeded in driving him out. Come, you two must be hungry. Let us have our dinner together." 2 leaves were spread on the ground, and all the dishes were equally divided into them. Meanwhile, Mr. Won't-Leave was watching all that took place below him and, being himself very hungry, was slyly watching for an opportunity to jump down. Mr. Won't-Give, gloating over his trickery, said to his wife, "Well, my love, did I not beat you without hurting you?" To which she replied, "Did I not continue to cry without shedding tears?" When suddenly there fell on their ears, "And did I not come to have my dinner without going away?" And down jumped Mr. Won't-Leave from the loft and took his seat in front of the leaf spread by Mr. Won't-Give for his wife. And Mr. Won't-Give, though disappointed, was highly pleased at the cleverness of his guest. This story is cited as the authority for 3 proverbs that have come into use in Tamil. Novamal Adiden, Oyamal Aruden, Pogamal Vandin, which represent the exchange of politeness between the husband, the wife, and the guest quoted in the foregoing paragraphs. Number 1 word is won't give, which means Kodamundan. Number 2, won't leave is Vidamundan. Story number 7. Vayalvallan Kayyavalle, Mr. Mighty of his mouth and Mr. Mighty of his hands. In 2 adjoining villages there lived 2 famous men. The one was called Mr. Mighty of his mouth, one that could accomplish wonders with words alone. The other was called Mr. Mighty of his hands, one who could make no use of that glib instrument, the tongue, but was able to bear burdens, cut wood, and perform other physical labor. It so happened that they agreed to live together in the house of the Mr. Mighty of his mouth to try and see which of them was the superior. They accordingly kept company for several months, till the great feast of the 9 nights, Navratri, came on. On the first day of the feast, Mr. Mighty of his hands wanted to sacrifice a goat to the goddess Kali. So he said to Mr. Mighty of his mouth, "My dear friend, we both are mighty in our way, and so it would be shameful for us to buy the goat that we want to sacrifice with money. We should manage to get it without payment." "Yes, we must do so, and I know how," replied Mr. Mighty of his mouth, and he asked his friend to wait till that evening. Now, there lived a shepherd at 1 Ghatika's hour's distance from their house, and the 2 friends resolved to go to his fold that night and steal away one of his goats. Accordingly, when it was dark, they approached his fold. The shepherd had just finished his duties to the mute members of his flock and wanted to go home and have his rice hot.
but he had no second person to watch the flock, and he must not lose his supper. So he planted his crook before the fold, and throwing his blanket, Kambali, over it, thus addressed it. My son, I am very hungry, and so must go for my rice. Till I return, do you watch the flock. This wood is rich in tigers and goblins, bhutas. Some mischievous thief or bhuta or kuta may come to steal away the sheep. Watch over them carefully. So saying, the shepherd went away. The friends had heard what the shepherd said. Of course, Mr. Mighty of his mouth laughed within himself at this device of the shepherd to impress upon would-be robbers that he had left someone there to watch his sheep, while really he had only planted a pole and thrown a blanket over it. Mr. Mighty of his hands, however, did not see the trick, and mistaking the stick to be an actual watchman sitting at his duty before the fold, spoke thus to his friend. Now, what are we to do? There is a watchman sitting in front of the fold. Thereon, Mr. Mighty of his mouth cleared away his doubts by saying that it was no watchman but a mere stick, and entered the fold with his friend. It had also so happened that on that very night a bhuta, that is goblin, had come into the fold to steal away a sheep. It shuddered with fear on hearing the shepherd mention the kuta, for having never heard of the existence of kutas, it mistook this imaginary being to be something superior in strength to itself. So, thinking that a kuta might come to the fold, and not wishing to expose itself till it knew well what kutas were, the bhuta transformed itself into a sheep and laid itself down among the flock. By this time, the two mighties had entered the fold and begun an examination of the sheep. They went on rejecting one animal after another for some defect or other, till at last they came to the sheep which was none other than the bhuta. They tested it, and when they found it very heavy, as, of course, it would be with the soul of the bhuta in it, they began to tie up its legs to carry it home. When hands began to shake it, the bhuta mistook the mighties for the kutas and said to himself, Alas! The kutas have come to take me away. What am I to do? What a fool I was to come into the fold. So thought the bhuta as Mr. Mighty of his hands was carrying it away on his head, with his friend following him behind. But the bhuta soon began to work its devilish powers to extricate itself, and Mr. Mighty of his hands began to feel pains all over his body and said to his friend, My dear Mighty, I feel pains all over me. I think what we have brought is no sheep. Mr. Mighty of his mouth was inwardly alarmed at the words of his friend, but did not like to show that he was afraid. So he said, Then put down the sheep, and let us tear open its belly, so that we shall each have only one half of it to carry. This frightened the bhuta, and he melted away on the head of Mr. Mighty of his hands, who, relieved of his devilish burden, was glad to return home safe with his friend. The bhuta, too, went to its abode, and there told his fellow goblins how it had involved itself into great trouble and how narrowly it had escaped. They all laughed at its stupidity and said, What a great fool you are! They were not kutas. In fact, there are no kutas in the world. They were men. And it was most stupid of you to have got yourself into their hands. Are you not ashamed to make such a fuss about your escape? The injured bhuta retorted that they would not have made such remarks had they seen the kutas. Then show us these kutas, as you chose to call them, said they, and we will crush them in the twinkling of an eye. Agreed, said the injured bhuta, and the next night it took them to the house of the mighties, and said from a distance, There is their house. I cannot approach it. Do whatever you like. The other bhutas were amazed at the fear of their timid brother, and resolved among themselves to put an end to the enemies of even one member of their caste. So they went in a great crowd to the house of the mighties. Some stood outside the house to see that none of the inmates escaped, and some watched in the backyard, while a score of them jumped over the walls and entered the courtyard. Mr. Mighty of his hands was sleeping in the veranda adjoining the courtyard, and when he heard the noise of people jumping about, he opened his eyes and to his terror saw some bhutas in the court. Without opening his mouth, he quietly rolled himself along the ground and went to the room where Mr. Mighty of his mouth was sleeping with his wife and children. Tapping gently at the door, he awoke his friend and said, "What shall we do now? The bhutas have invaded our house and will soon kill us." Mr. Mighty of his mouth told him quietly not to be afraid, but to go and sleep in his original place, and that he himself would make the bhutas run away. Mr. Mighty of his hands did not understand what his friend meant, but not wishing to argue, rolled his way back to his original place and pretended to sleep, though his heart was beating terribly with fright. Mr. Mighty of his mouth now awoke his wife and instructed her thus, "My dearest wife, the foolish bhutas have invaded our house, but if you act accordingly to my advice, we are safe, and the goblins will depart harmlessly. What I want you to do is to go to the hall and light a lamp, spread leaves on the floor, and then pretend to awake me for my supper. I shall get up and inquire what you have ready to give me to eat. You will then reply that you have only pepper, water, and vegetables. With an angry face, I shall say, 'What have you done with the 3 bhutas that our son caught hold of on his way back from school?' Your reply must be, 'The rogue wanted some sweetmeats on coming home. Unfortunately, I had none in the house, so he roasted the 3 bhutas and gobbled them up.'" Thus instructing his wife, Mr. Mighty of his mouth pretended to go to sleep. The wife accordingly spread the leaves and called her husband for his supper. During the conversation that followed, the fact that the son had roasted 3 goblins for sweetmeats was conveyed to the bhutas. They shuddered at the son's extraordinary ability and thought, "What must the father do for his meals when a son roasts 3 bhutas for sweetmeats?" So they at once took to their heels. Then going to the brother they had jeered at, they said to him that indeed the Kutas were their greatest enemies, and that none of their lives was safe while they remained where they were, as on that very evening the son of a Kuta had roasted 3 of them for sweetmeats. They therefore all resolved to fly away to the adjoining forest and disappeared accordingly. Thus Mr. Mighty of his mouth saved himself and his friend on 2 occasions from the bhutas. The friends after this went out one day to an adjoining village and were returning home rather late in the evening. Darkness fell on them before half the way was traversed, and there lay before them a dense wood infested by beasts of prey. So they resolved to spend the night in a high tree and go home next morning, and accordingly got up into a big people. Now this was the very wood into which the bhutas had migrated, and at midnight they all came down with torches to catch jackals and other animals to feast upon. The fear of Mr. Mighty of his hands may be more imagined than described. The dreaded bhutas were at the foot of the very tree in which he had taken up his abode for the night. His hands trembled, his body shook. He lost his hold, and down he came with a horrible rustling of leaves. His friend, however, was, as usual, ready with a device and bawled out, "I wish to leave these poor beings to their own revelry, but you are hungry and must needs jump down to catch some of them. Do not fail to lay your hands on the stoutest bhuta." The goblins heard the voice, which was already very familiar to their ears, for was it not the Kuta whose son had roasted up 3 bhutas for sweetmeats that spoke? So they ran away at once, crying out, Alas, what misery! Our bitter enemies have followed us even to this wood. Thus the wit of Mr. Mighty of his mouth saved himself and his friend for the third time. The sun began to rise, and Mr. Mighty of his hands thrice walked round Mr. Mighty of his mouth and said, My dear friend, truly, you only of us two are mighty. Mere physical strength is of no use without skill in words. The latter is far superior to the former, and if a man possesses both, he is, as it were, a golden lotus having a sweet scent. It is enough for me now to have arrived at this moral. With your kind permission, I shall return to my village. Mr. Mighty of his mouth asked his friend not to consider himself under any obligation, and, after honouring him as became his position, he let him return to his village. The moral of this short story is that in man there is nothing great but mind. Number 1 word, Mr. Mighty of his mouth, is Vayalvallan. Number 2, Mighty of his hands, is Kayalvallan. The third word is Kuta. There is no such word as Kuta in Tamil. The Tamil and other Dravidian languages allow rhyming repetitions of word like this: Bhuta, Kuta. Story 8. The mother-in-law became an ass. Little by little, the mother-in-law became an ass. Vada vada mami kadudai palanal is a proverb among the Tamils, applied to those who day by day go downwards in their progress in study, position, or life, and based on the following story. In a certain village, there lived a Brahman with his wife, mother, and mother-in-law. He was a very good man and equally kind to all of them. His mother complained of nothing at his hands, but his wife was a very bad-tempered woman and always troubled her mother-in-law by keeping her engaged in this work or that throughout the day and giving her very little food in the evening. Owing to this, the poor Brahman's mother was almost dying of misery. On the other hand, her own mother received very kind treatment, of course, at her daughter's hands. But the husband was so completely ruled by his wife that he had no strength of mind to oppose her ill treatment of his mother. One evening, just before sunset, the wife abused her mother-in-law with such fury that the latter had to fly away to escape a thrashing. Full of misery, she ran out of the village, but the sun had begun to set, and the darkness of night was fast overtaking her. So finding a ruined temple, she entered it to pass the night there. It happened to be the abode of the village Kali goddess, who used to come out every night at midnight to inspect her village. That night she perceived a woman, the mother of the poor Brahman, lurking within her prakaras, that is boundaries, and being a most benevolent Kali, called out to her and asked her what made her so miserable that she should leave her home on such a dark night. The Brahmani told her story in a few words, and while she was speaking, the cunning goddess was using her supernatural powers to see whether all she said was true or not, and finding it to be the truth, she thus replied in very soothing tones, "I pity your misery, mother, because your daughter-in-law troubles and vexes you thus when you have become old and have no strength in your body. Now take this mango." And taking a ripe one from out her waistband, she gave it to the old Brahmani with a smiling face. "Eat it, and you will soon become a young woman like your own daughter-in-law, and then she shall no longer trouble you." Thus consoling the afflicted old woman, the kind-hearted Kali went away. The Brahmani lingered for the remainder of the night in the temple, and being a fond mother, she did not like to eat the whole of the mango without giving a portion of it to her son. Meanwhile, when her son returned home in the evening, he found his mother absent, but his wife explained the matter to him so as to throw the blame on the old woman, as she always did. As it was very dark, he had no chance of going out to search for her, so he waited for the daylight, and as soon as he saw the dawn, started to look for his mother. He had not walked far when to his joy he found her in the temple of Kali.
"How did you pass the cold night, my dearest mother?" said he. "What did you have for dinner? Wretch that I am to have got myself married to a cur! Forget all her faults and return home." His mother shed tears of joy and sorrow and related her previous night's adventure, upon which he said, "Delay not even one nimisha, that is minute, but eat this fruit at once. I do not want any of it. Only if you become young and strong enough to stand that nasty cur's troubles, well and good." So the mother ate up the divine fruit, and the son took her upon his shoulders and brought her home, on reaching which he placed her on the ground, when to his joy she was no longer an old woman, but a young girl of 16 and stronger than his own wife. The troublesome wife was now totally put down and was powerless against so strong a mother-in-law. She did not at all like the change and having to give up her habits of bullying, and so she argued to herself thus, "This jade of a mother-in-law became young through the fruit of the Kali. Why should not my mother also do the same, if I instruct her and send her to the same temple?" So she instructed her mother as to the story she ought to give to the goddess and sent her there. Her old mother, agreeably to her daughter's injunctions, went to the temple, and on meeting with the goddess at midnight, gave a false story that she was being greatly ill-treated by her daughter-in-law, though in truth she had nothing of the kind to complain of. The goddess perceived the lie through her divine powers, but pretending to pity her, gave her also a fruit. Her daughter had instructed her not to eat it till next morning, and till she saw her son-in-law. As soon as morning approached, the poor henpecked Brahman was ordered by his wife to go to the temple and fetch his mother-in-law, as he had some time back fetched away his mother. He accordingly went and invited her to come home. She wanted him to eat part of the fruit as she had been instructed, but he refused, and so she swallowed it all, fully expecting to become young again on reaching home. Meanwhile, her son-in-law took her on his shoulders and returned home, expecting, as his former experience had taught him, to see his mother-in-law also turn into a young woman. Anxiety to see how the change came on overcame him, and halfway he turned his head and found such part of the burden on his shoulders as he could see to be like parts of an ass. But he took this to be a mere preliminary stage towards youthful womanhood. Again he turned, and again he saw the same thing several times, and the more he looked, the more his burden became like an ass, till at last, when he reached home, his burden jumped down braying like an ass and ran away. Thus the Kali, perceiving the evil intentions of the wife, disappointed her by turning her mother into an ass. But no one knew of it till she actually jumped down from the shoulders of her son-in-law. This story is always cited as the explanation of the proverb quoted above, "Vara vara mami kaludai palanal." Little by little, the mother-in-law became an ass, to which is also commonly added, "Vadambodu ulaida talipatal." And as she approached the village, she began to bray. And that brings us to the end of episode 3, from the clever wit of Mr. Mighty of his mouth to the strange fate of the mother-in-law. I hope these stories from the Tales of the Sun gave you a little window into the vibrant folklore of Southern India. It's amazing how these classic tales still hold so much humor and wisdom today. If you enjoyed today's reading, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who loves a good story. Don't forget to subscribe to Mountain Home Stories and ring the bell so you don't miss our next chapter. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Till then, take care and bye-bye.